Welcome to Dr. Amber Thornton's Know and Grow podcast, where you're never alone in navigating life's biggest moments and toughest lessons. Join me, Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist, mother of two, as I explore motherhood, parenting, relationships, career, mental health, and the ongoing journey of personal evolution. No, it doesn't stop. These conversations will absolutely make you laugh, may make you cry, will get you to reflect, but more importantly, you'll grow and we'll get to grow together. So I'm glad you're here and I hope that you'll come back. Tune in weekly for informative, thought-provoking, inspiring conversations right here with me. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. And we actually have our first guest today on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to this guest. She and I have actually been following each other on social media for a while. And I'm really excited to chat about parenting, attachment, all those things that we as parents think about, are talking about. So I'm going to actually have her introduce herself. Please, special guest, introduce yourself.
Good day, everyone. I am Michelle Collins. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Maryland. I also own a private practice, Ashe Therapy and Services, based out of Baltimore. I'm also a mom, a wife, and plenty of other hats that I'm sure I put on at some point in the day.
Yes, beautiful. I'm so happy to talk to you, Michelle. Thank you so
Me too.
much. I'm really
Thank you
excited.
for having me. I am
Oh,
too. You're right. We've been following each other for a long time, and I'm always just like, Dr. Amber and I feel like we could be friends in another lifetime and like just have a lot of similarities in how we look at the world and look at family stuff, parenting. So I'm so excited to be here with you and start some of this conversation today.
agreed. And honestly, when I was thinking about it, you know how sometimes you have friends online and you're like, I know I've met her in person, but then you realize, oh, I actually have not.
You would think, right? And like even as you say that, I'm like, no, we definitely have. But like where, right? We would probably go through it and be like, I don't know. But we're again similar backgrounds, I think, in terms of clinically, even personally in some ways. And so it feels very like aligned, I guess, in some ways.
And I feel like that just means that we will be meeting in the future. I'm just going to put that out there for us. It's going to happen.
Oh yeah, summer for sure. We doing
Yes.
something.
Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. So whenever I open up my podcast, I always like to start out talking about astrology. It's
Yeah.
something I'm doing because I don't know about you. I'm really trying to just be more authentic and also embrace hobbies. As therapists and professionals, we tend to get stuck in this whole work life thing. And I've realized I really am
Hmm.
interested in astrology. So I figured we could start off real quick today, just talking a little bit about what do you feel about astrology, but more so, do you ever use it in your parenting? Like, do you know your sign? Do you know your kid's sign? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I funny enough, I was listening to one of your previous episodes and you were talking about how you got into astrology and I was like, "Oh, she's like really reading it. She's not doing just the like reading a little newspaper clip and like, all right, today Leo says you're gonna make some money," which I love and I really appreciate you just bringing that to the conversation sometimes, just as other pieces of it, because I think otherwise we get focused right on the sun sign, I think, and people just kind of go with that and sometimes I think dismiss some pretty cool information. So my orientation to or my understanding of astrology is really limited. I've been looking at it a little bit more maybe recently. Um,
Mhm.
from my friends who are very into it, they know that I'm a Leo. And even as I say that, people always like do that face with Leos. So I'm
Not
like,
just
wait a
it.
minute. You are speaking already about me. And I'm like, I'm not a typical Leo, whatever that means. But I'm sure if I got into further into my birth chart, that would explain some of my unique or yeah, some of my specific characteristics around being a Leo. But anyway, I'm a Leo. My oldest son is a Cancer, and my baby is a Sagittarius, and then my husband is a Taurus. I do feel like though there's something happening between the four. Sometimes I look at what's going on in my household and I'm like, I mean, yes, this is personality, but whoa, whoa, y'all following some patterns right now that I've read about. And I see what now, why people look at us kind of like, oh, that's who lives in your house? Because Yeah. So that's as much as I know. I know
That
that our little mixture is mixy.
it is mixy. And you know what? Because so it sounds like you're a Leo, which I definitely made that face when you said Leo, because Leo is so like bold and alive. I really like that about Leos. And so my son is actually a Leo rising, which is not
Mm-hmm.
sign, but it's more like his first impression sign. So
Mm-hmm.
resonate with that. But the cool thing about your house, it sounds like there's a nice balance of all the elements. You're
Yeah.
fire, one of your kids is fire, there's Cancer, so that's water. And then your husband, you said is Taurus.
Uh-huh.
My husband is also Taurus, so there's the earth.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, you know me, I love astrology and yeah, I just love it. I'm a Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is a Aries, my son is a Gemini, and my husband is also a Taurus. So we have all of the elements represented, which is nice. But I do like thinking about, I don't know, for me, once I've actually started diving into it more deeply, it's just kind of helped give me another way to look at parenting and how I
Mm-hmm.
relate to my kids. It just kind of, especially through the toddler years, it kind of helped me understand like, okay, this is maybe why he or she is doing something in this way. And I just need to accept it because this is how they're doing it. It might be different
Yep.
from me, but it's okay.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. With my little cancer baby someday. So a good friend of mine is a cancer and I text her sometimes and I'm like, tell your parents to reach out to me and give me some advice about how they handle these moments because
Yeah.
woo,
The
it's so
cancer is a lot of emotion, I'm sure.
yes. 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 And as the child of a therapist, it's just like
Right.
anyway, it's
I know.
interesting.
It's so fascinating. I feel like we could talk for days about this, but we'll come back to that topic. Really,
Hmm.
I like talking to parents about astrology and how it fits for them. But speaking of parenting, so one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you is because, like you said, I feel like we align pretty well with our practice and how we're working with clients, and especially when we're working with parents, and we also are parents and we're millennials as well. And so I don't know about you, but I have noticed this trend within people that I work with online, but also myself too. It's just this fear. I feel like there's a lot of fear around, are we attaching well to our kids? Are we making too many mistakes? And then on the flip side of that, it's like, are we too focused on making mistakes, and does that then lead to more anxiety? Like I just noticed this big tension, and we want to do well as parents because many of us have had experiences where things maybe didn't feel good for us growing up, or maybe we wish that we had a different relationship with our parents growing up, and now we're trying to fix all of that. But there's just something happening where I sometimes feel like it's just leading us to feel more stressed. So I was just hoping we could talk about that today. Attachment, repair, mistakes.
Hmm.
I know that there's a tool that you use, Circle of Security. So I really want us to talk about that stuff today because it's a thing.
Yes, it is a thing. And this is like what I love talking about with families because it's really great information to know. And I think sometimes calm some of that nervousness that we bring into the space when we're parenting. And you bring up a good point about like you and I being similar millennial parents. I think a lot of millennial parents are going to therapy for the first time, or just looking at the world in a different way than our parents were either had the privilege to do or had the resources to do. So it's a lot of information to process. And in that, a lot of people are like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? And it's a little bit more nuanced than just doing it right. And I really try to help people understand that by using tools like Circle of Security, for example. And I think helping them understand what attachment is and isn't. So I kind of
Mhm.
want to start there.
Yep. I was just going to say, let's start there because I feel like there's so much mixed information about, oh, this means you're securely attached. Oh, you're not
Yes.
securely attached. Oh, you make that mistake, no more attachment. Like, let's start there so we can just have a nice foundation to work on.
Rule number one, parents on social media and everything else, listening to this podcast today, do an audit of your social media. If you're following accounts that are too black and white about some of this stuff, unfollow them. It's just
Mhm.
not that simple.
Mhm.
It's not that, oh, you woke up one morning and you accidentally caught an attitude with your child. And so they're doomed for a future of poor relationships or abusive relationships. It's not that simple at all. I'm using air quotes because some of these TikTok mental health advocates, attachment experts, and all this stuff, I'm like,
Yep.
come on now, wait a minute. I need you to show me the study that you read. I need you to show me something else because you're on this internet just talking about anything. So, but specifically, let me go into attachment before I go off about I don't like when parents are feeling bullied by the internet. I'm quick in a session to be like, we need to unfollow that account because you are great, your kids are great, and you're going to do great. So anyway, but attachment, how it refers to a child or an infant's ability to trust in their parents or their caregivers, reliability, security, acceptance, and just overall like love. And that takes on a lot of different meanings, but I'm using it pretty loosely now. But
Mhm.
really, when you think about attachment, I often paint a picture for parents about like being at the playground with their child. And attachment refers to you being consistent and available when a child is out exploring. So when we're at a playground with our kids, I'm sure a lot of parents have noticed their kid will be doing something, they'll say, look at me, look at me. Or if they try something new, even they'll look over their shoulder and kind of check to see, is my parent watching me? Is my parent nearby? That's what
Mhm.
attachment refers to. Again, are you consistently accessible? Are you consistently encouraged? And are you consistently tr- being in a trustworthy position for this child? It does not refer to clinginess. So a child that, for example, just is afraid or really anxious about leaving their parent, that actually is not a sign of secure attachment. It does not even really refer to like a baby, for example, that wants to be close to their mom or dad most of the time. That's not really attachment either. Again, attachment is this almost lifelong, or especially in early childhood, from like 0 to 6, this
Mhm.
process of the parent and the child creating a working relationship where the child knows they can look to the caregiver for support, for information, and for guidance through this world that they're trying to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. And the one thing that always would stand out to me when I was learning about attachment and attachment theories was similar, that playground analogy where your child is at the playground and they're venturing off. But the one that always would stick with me is they feel safe venturing off, knowing that they can always go back to that home base or they always can look back and you're there. And so there's
Yes.
also that of safety where I can explore because my attachment figure is always back there. And I
Mm-hmm.
love thinking about that too, just in terms of our kids getting older. I think sometimes, I know we're not there yet, but I'm thinking about teenagers. I
Mm-hmm.
know sometimes parents really struggle with like, oh, they don't want to talk to me anymore, or our relationship has changed, and they get really nervous about, okay, what's wrong with our attachment? When really it's like, if you think about it from that perspective, maybe your teenager is feeling safe to explore all these other identities, all these other social circles, and they know you're back there, but they feel free and safe to explore, and they know they can fall back on you, and that's a really good thing. Similar with
Yeah.
adults. You know, when you become an adult and you know, hey, I can explore the world, I can go do what I need to do. I know I can always fall back on my home base. And that's always been
Yeah.
a string metaphor for me when it comes to attachment. And also just the idea that attachment can withstand mistakes.
It can withstand stress. It can
It can
withstand
withstand stress.
if
Yeah.
you're at the playground and you're looking at your phone for a second and your kid says, look at me, and it takes you 30 extra seconds, an extra minute, extra 5 minutes to catch whatever they're doing, it's okay. It's like very okay.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I think one thing I bring to the forefront or just talk about a lot with my clients too is considering the systems that we're in as well in
Mm-hmm.
America, where we got to
Yep.
pay money to have lights on, to get water out of the faucet, to have food on your table. This idea that you are 24/7 going to be available to your child is completely impossible. It's
Unrealistic.
unrealistic. There is no way at all for you to do that when you still have to go to work, when you still have to maybe get an extra degree to advance in your job, to create more financial security for your children. whatever it may be. But I often try to help people understand this
Mhm.
isn't going to look like some like waking up in the morning singing songs. And as soon as your child skims their knee, that you're there with a band-aid. Like, or even
No,
if your child is having a bad day, yeah, it might be a couple of hours before you get home, and you guys may not be able to talk about it until the next day, and it may not happen that night, and that's okay. It's okay to accept your circumstances in some ways and figure out how to work around it versus forcing yourself into this very ideal identity that does not fit your circumstances or fit the system that you're in.
absolutely. And I think that goes back to so it's taking me two ways. But first, I want to go back a little bit to the idea of all this information that we get online. On one hand, like, love it. Y'all know I love Instagram. I love
Yep.
social media. There's so much good information. But
Yes.
then also what ends up happening is with a lot of the parenting accounts, the intention is to be helpful, but they're taking like one single moment and we tend to then extrapolate it to something much more, right? So like what you
Yep.
just said, your child skins their knee or something, and it takes a while for you to get over to them, or they're saying, hey mommy, but you're finishing up a very important email. You know, the parenting accounts will have you feeling like, oh my gosh, I didn't respond when he first called, relationship over. Like
The
I'm the
parenting accounts will
like fear inducing. Like it's
yeah,
stressful.
yeah.
And that's what I don't like. And I think again, many of them are very much well intended. There was one in, okay, I'm gonna take 10 seconds to vent because this one still
Hmm.
irks me
Hmm.
every time I think about it. There was one account where, it was a father, which was really awesome, and with his son, and he's like, basically, the premise was like, I never tell my son to hurry up in the morning. We never rush because it's important for him to feel comfortable. And I'm like, bro, I tell my children to hurry up every morning. So what does that mean? And so it's like luckily, I'm a psychologist and I can like take this and be like, okay, I get where he's going, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with my approach or my parenting or my attachment with our kids. But there's a lot of people who might look at that and realizing, like you said, their circumstance means I gotta get to the office by 8. We gotta get out of the house by 7:45. You gotta put your, and we know with toddlers, that's a shit show. And so every morning you
Yes,
might be saying, hurry up, despite how amazing your routines are. Or it might just take a lot of time to get the routines to be where you want them to be. But it's things like that where it's like that can be so stressful for a parent who is already stressed, but also really trying very hard to do the best that they can.
exactly. And my frustration sometimes with pages like that is one, either they don't give you the script that you could do otherwise. So they just tell you that you shouldn't be doing this thing. They never tell you what else to do. So now you're like, okay, so I'm not saying hurrying up.
So
And
what
it's
do I
so
do?
funny. It's funny you say that. My 3-year-old always jokes. He's like, Mommy, you're walking so fast. I'm like, yep, pick up your feet, friend. Let's keep it moving. Like, use that body. It's strong. Like, there's other ways to actually talk about it from a positive aspect. And again, I think some of it is so like it's
Yeah.
honestly a bit discriminatory to different types of families, right? You're naming people that have to be to work by a certain time. We're naming people who might be teachers. And if they are not to school on time, their principal is going to have a problem with that. And they may not always have to be able to say, oh, my 3-year-old decided that he didn't like that I said, hurry up, and that hurt his feelings. Like, and there's also, again, ways to say, hurry, 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 run, run, run. Like, there's
Exactly.
ways to make it fun or make it more child centered, if you will, and not just make parents feel like they're doing everything wrong. So again, sometimes they
Yeah.
don't give you the script that you could be saying. And then I've seen some of these accounts. I'm always like trying to some of them, they're kind of interesting because they won't show the face of whoever is running it, because that's what I'm sometimes curious about too. I try to only follow accounts with people that look like me, but also their family setup looks like mine too. Working parents, living in the city, you know what I mean? Those types of things. But all
Mhm.
that to say, I've run into some accounts as well where they'll give you the script of what to say. And I'm like, who is remembering this 3-minute monologue to say to a toddler? It'll be like, good morning, honey. I need you to understand that we have to be to school by this time. And if you look at the clock, we still have this much time. And when we move to the green, I need you to.
Too much.
And I'm like, sorry, first of all, I'm not much of a morning person. Second of all, if my kid is so set on playing, there's nothing I can say or rationalize in that moment to get him to do it different. So I simply have to set up the routine different, like you were mentioning, or I got to get shorter with my language. And that's one thing, again, with these like some of
Mm-hmm.
these therapy and mental health accounts. That's how I know they're not well researched because they're not even or well informed because they're not considering brain development, they're not considering neurodiversity. You can't have that much conversation with a 2 year old when they are getting upset because I don't even think 15% of what you're saying is getting into their brain in a way that's helpful. So that's again, there's a lot of great information on the internet, and there's a lot of information that I think can just increase anxiety, increase fear, and make parents feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing this right, and my child is going to be in, a relationship in a few years that doesn't serve them, or they're not going to have high self-esteem, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it reminds me when we were talking about this episode, you said a phrase that I really want you to elaborate on more now, attached enough. And I think it really also reflects, like you were saying, there's a certain type of like family makeup or just people in general who there's a lot of stressors in the day-to-day life. There's a lot of things that you have to do, a lot of responsibilities. And I feel like sometimes just this idea of attached enough can really be very reassuring for people who realistically have a lot going on while also really wanting to try the very best they can to show up for their children. So please talk more about attached enough, because when you first mentioned it, it was like, oh, we need to hear that.
Yeah. So when I talk with parents and family members about what attachedness can look like in their family, I ask them how they are practicing mutual respect in their household. So, do you allow your child to have choices at times? Do you allow your child to have input into the family setup, especially if it comes to things just as simple as what are we having for dinner? Where are we going this weekend? Those types of things. Respecting that sometimes your child might need privacy or your child might need some space away from everything going on because they're struggling. So, the same things that we would want for ourselves, are we practicing mutual respect in our household? And then I talk with them about really small things that can help a child feel seen and I think feel valued in a family system. Are you making eye contact with your child on a regular basis? Like, it's interesting when I ask that because parents will say, yeah, of course. Then I'm like, okay, when you go home today, just notice how often you actually just look at them. It doesn't have to be this long conversation or this long drawn out thing, but just making eye contact with them when you're cooking, making eye contact when you're reading the book, for example, and they're getting ready for bed. So mutual respect, doing things like eye contact and helping them just feel seen and feel included. And then just being willing to talk with them really can make a difference in what attachment can look like and help them buffer against mistakes that are naturally going to happen because we have stressors. We're
Yep.
doing this for the first time for some of us. Even if it's our third kid, we're still going to have to learn that child and learn their unique things that they need. So there are going to be times that we slip up, but are we taking time to, again, just acknowledge who they are, value who they are? That all adds to attachment. And again, having those conversations with them of, it can be things like, I'm happy to see you, or it could be things like, I was upset a few minutes ago and I still need a break from you. I'm not ready to be nice right now. All
Yep.
of that can aid in what attached enough looks like and the outcome that we're hoping for is a child that doesn't shake when they have to tell you about something bad that happened at school. I might be saying something that might be triggering for some folks or maybe even a little scary to think about, but I've seen some kids literally be like, I don't want to tell my dad that I don't want onions on my sandwich. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, this is a sign for me. And it's not to say that things can't be corrected at that point, but just noticing, like, can your kid just say simple things like, I don't like this food without being worried that you're going to be upset? Or can your kid know that they can climb up on the monkey bars without being super fearful of either falling or that you're going to say, you're not ready for that. You're not ready for that. Those are some of the things that can distract or take away from what a hopeful or optimal attachment can look like. Now that I'm
Mhm.
saying it out loud, I'm like, oh God, I hope I'm not like sounding like the TikTok therapist inducing more anxiety. It's like I just really want to help people understand it is actually
Mhm.
simple. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
it's treating them like humans for real. Like treating them like you would a friend. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
use the word friend in my household a lot, which is an interesting, like millennial kind of curse breaking, if you will, because all of us grew up with parents that were like, I'm not your little friend. I'm my kid's little friend.
Yeah.
Like
Me
sometimes we're
too.
playing together, or sometimes they're making jokes and I'm laughing, or I'm making jokes and they're laughing. And in a friendship, there's balance, there's mutual caring. It's different because there's a hierarchy in some ways, and I do have to care for them in a very specific way.
Yep.
And there are some basic tenets of this relationship that I do in other relationships really well that I can bring here, and I don't have to make it a big deal. It's just treating them
Yes.
like a little person.
I feel you. And I think what you said is so funny because the other day, me and my son Cedric were talking about something, and he just blows me away every time he says something. And he was basically asking if I was still gonna be his mommy when he's a grown up. And I was like, I'm always gonna be your mommy. And he was like, well, I can drive you places, and you could be my mommy and my friend. And I was like, of
We
course.
can. We can be mommy and friends. Yes.
Yes. And it very much made me think of just how generationally things have changed a bit because yeah, back in the day it was like, look, I'm not your friend. I'm your mom. I'm your dad. We're not friends. But now I think we're embracing this idea of what you said. Our children are little humans. And what does it mean to treat them well? But also, how can we open up parenting them by throwing in this aspect of, hey, we can be friends because friendship really is just mutual, respect, mutual caring. We can do this thing where, yes, I'm caring for you, I'm raising for you, I'm providing your needs, and guess what? There's a safety here. We can respect each other. Like we can be friends. Absolutely. I think that's important. I think that's something that parents today are really embracing a bit, but
Mm-hmm.
also too, it is simple what you're saying, attached enough for being attached. It's simple, but also I think what you were feeling too is like it's complex too. There's so many factors because when you break it down the way that you said it, that's the thing that came to me too. Like this is simple. And I think that is what makes people feel assured when you're thinking about, okay, attached enough is really just, okay, these core things that I need to be thinking about. Do my children feel seen? Do my children feel heard? Are we making eye contact? Do they feel safe to speak? Are we communicating? Is there respect here? That's super simple. And then there was this other part of me that was thinking, and I think it's because of the book that I just wrote, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, everyone. What happens if you're dysregulated and you can't do those things? Or what if you are struggling with anxiety or depression and you can't do those things, or you're just not even aware that you're not hitting those simple markers when it comes to being attached, right? And so it's like on one
Mm-hmm.
hand, it is super simple, but then it also is it's complex because basically, I think parenting is so much more than just our relationship with our kids. It's also our relationship with ourselves and how
Yes.
we're treating ourselves. And do we need to go sit on one of our couches? Do we need therapy? Like, we also need to be thinking about all those other things too, so that we can access the simplicity that can be found in just maintaining appropriate and secure attachment with our kids.
Yeah. Can I say something to that real quick?
Mhm.
I also, when I talk with parents about like embracing attachment and embracing um, the meaning of their family, I get them to talk one about their like philosophy of parenting. Where is it coming from? Who are they basing it on? Because sometimes they're basing it on people that again don't fit into their world. And then what are the outcomes that they're looking for? Because I try to tell them too, sometimes there's multiple pathways to get to this outcome. So, this one that you've been dreaming of, sure, I'll agree with you. Objectively, yes, it would be great if you could every morning start your morning routine off with song and dance, and then y'all eat breakfast together, and then you get out the door gracefully. That would be awesome,
Yep.
objectively. there's a lot of reasons why that may not happen. So again, if we have to adjust to this path, these are different things you can pick up along the way to still get to the outcomes that you're getting to. And then talking with parents a little bit about just like how they are practicing some of those same tenets we've talked about: self-respect, self-acceptance, self-caring. All of those pieces are critical for you to be doing internally and for yourself so that you can do it for this other kid. One thing that I loved about my own therapy journey, and I so appreciated doing that before becoming a parent, is that I embrace that I am a control freak. I tell
Oh,
all
me
my clients, this is a control freak welcoming practice
too.
because control means safety, and I will not deny you safety. But what that looks like in my household is every night I spend 10 minutes putting things back in the place that they live. My 3-year-old says, Mommy, this lives over here. That's how we explain it, and that's how he gets it. Because I know if in the morning I can't find my key where it's supposed to be living, there is a 90% increase that I am yelling before we get out the door because now I'm pissed that I couldn't find something. It slowed us down. Something else happened in the meantime. The same thing is true of, like, for example, like teenagers. I ask parents to encourage themselves to know about themselves. If you like really aren't cool with the music that they listen to, don't try to be the cool parent and all of a sudden put it on in the car and now you irritated because they playing a song that's got they playing Sexy Red or something. Like, it is what it is. Just accept that certain parts of you are going to still remain true, even in this
Yes.
process of evolution. When you are welcoming children in and you want to be open to flexibility, you want to be open to change, practice some self acceptance about some core pieces of who you are, and it'll
Wow.
be much easier to show up authentically with your children. And again, find a system that works for you and will work and will help your child feel included in that, because your child is half of you in some ways too. So there's another piece, right? That if you're denying part of yourself, how are you potentially denying part of that part of you within your child?
Yes.
But again, practicing, I gotta respect that I'm a control freak. I gotta respect that I'm not a girl that can just go to bed and know that things are in disarray. I got to wake up to a house that looks a certain way. I have to do things a certain way so that I'm set up to be my best self with my kids.
Yeah. That's why we resonate, because you're me. That was pretty much that's how I am too. But that was something there that I needed to hear too, just that self-acceptance, because if I'm being critical of myself, harsh of myself, not accepting just these parts of me that maybe I don't like very much, because acceptance doesn't mean like, it means
Right.
accept. And so if I'm not being accepting of who I am, how can I do that for my children? How can I accept them for who they are? I'm not modeling self-acceptance if I'm not accepting myself. So I feel like that was so good. That was good.
You know, the core piece, not core, what's the word? Sometimes my brain, because it is a distractible pinball place
Yeah.
sometimes. But I
Yeah.
just want to help people know too, you know, the word attachment and attachment theory was really pioneered, if you will, in what we know in modern day by these two white psychologists. I think they were both British.
Mhm.
And they did all these studies with animals. But I want to help people understand attachment is about like basic science. You look at penguins, you look at lions, you look at any animal across the world, their babies stay with them for a certain amount of time to pick up two things. How do I survive in this world? And what genetic information do I need to model from you as I
Mhm.
grow? And with humans is more complex because we have our language is set up a little bit differently. We have reading and whatnot, and all these other things that are unique to the human species. But at the end of the day, just as you were saying, how am I showing up in a world and modeling for my child certain behaviors that I want them to do? Which again is okay if you yell sometimes. It's okay if even your kid learns a 4 letter word that most 3-year-olds don't know, but that your 3-year-old knows. I'm not telling on myself, whatever. But all that to say, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how do you teach your child to be in relationship with other people? How do you teach your child to talk to themselves when they're having a hard time? How do you teach your child to prioritize rest and food and taking care of basic needs? That's the genetic information that our children need for survival and what they're often looking to us to during some of those early years in forming attachment and even later down the line if they're still growing up in our household.
Oh my God. Ooh, we might need a part two. So I know we have like 15 minutes left. So I'm looking
Yes,
at the clock
ma'am.
and I'm trying to acknowledge our time,
Yes.
but want to talk about the repair.
Yep.
Because I
What
think that's
happens when
yes, what happens when we do make a mistake and then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid this has ruined my attachment. How do I even fix it with my kids? Can you talk about that piece? Because I think that's also like we see a lot of information about that online and social media about this is what you should do, but it also can be confusing. Just the repair. What does that look like for families like ours?
totally? First of all, I just want to say to everyone listening today and that will watch this, there really are a very, very, very small group of things that will actually completely disrupt your attachment with your child and throw off that trajectory in a way that will need very specific and intense intervention. And that is either voluntary or involuntary separation from your child for a long period of time. By that, I mean a child that was put in foster care or that is placed for adoption that 9 times out of 10 is going to disrupt their attachment and impact their attachment development over time. Um, yeah, actually, that might be it. And outside of military deployment, I want to say that I'm talking about again kids that don't have contact with their parents for a variety of reasons. And obviously, there's patterns of behavior that lead to that, whether it's abuse, neglect, or whatever that begins the process of that attachment disruption. But to
Mhm.
everyone listening, your
Yeah.
kid is not going to hate you if you did not buy that Paw Patrol toy out of the store 3 times in a row. It's just not going to work like that. So there are actually a very, very small subset of things that can cause, again, long-term impact or long-term effects from a disruption in the attachment.
Mhm.
Now, when we're talking about these smaller things that can happen from a day to day, whether it's us getting pissed off really easily with our kids or forgetting certain things about our kid and therefore not practicing acceptance, a lot of that can look like, again, conversation. So in my household, we do practice saying, I'm sorry, I apologize. We also talk about what was going on, though. I think bringing context to some of those moments is more empowering for our children because then they can have a better language bank that they can pull from when they're getting older and they need to talk to us about what's going on, or if they need to talk with friends or eventually romantic partners about what's going on. I don't know
Mhm.
about you. While I can appreciate my husband saying I apologize for certain things happening, I am much more impacted and I appreciate much more when he takes the time to say, I was thinking more about what happened earlier when we were having this conversation. And really, I was doing this, and this is what was happening, or this is what was going on for me. And this is what I want to do moving forward. There was no apology in that, but there was accountability and an acknowledgement of what was going on. And so for me, repair, I often encourage people to think about what does accountability and acknowledgement look like.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm sorry sets you up too. They're like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that anymore because you already made the mistake once. And I ain't gonna promise that. I'm not gonna promise that I'm not gonna lose my
Great.
cool again. But
It's
what I
gonna
can It's going to happen. But what I
happen.
can tell you is, okay,
Yeah.
there was a lot of noise going on, and mommy started feeling really frustrated. I
Mhm.
should have walked away, but I didn't, and it made me yell at you. That's
Yes.
it.
That's
That's
it.
it.
Ooh, that is so, again, gems, because that makes me think about, and again, it takes me back to the book that I wrote.
Yes.
It made me think of like this mom, right, who is dysregulated. Maybe she's a new mom, maybe she has toddlers, and she keeps losing her cool, she keeps yelling, she keeps making a mistake. The I'm sorry does set you up because it's like you know it's going to happen again. Like, yeah, you're working on it. You might even be in therapy. You might be reading the book, like whatever it is. I know you're working on it, and that doesn't mean that you're perfect. It's going to keep
Right.
happening. And so, like you said, that acknowledgement of what happened, providing some context, what should have happened, that is so important. And that's how we handle things in our household too. So like for instance, if I've lost my cool with the children and I'll say, you know what? Mommy did this. I shouldn't have done that. I was not feeling too great because of such and such and such. Next time, I'm going to do such and such. Boom. And they get it.
They
Sometimes they'll do the
do.
conversation for me. They'll be like, Mommy, you were probably overwhelmed. And next time you should do this. And I'm like, you're right. You're absolutely right. And so I agree, it's that acknowledgement of what happened, that mutual understanding, so that we're on the same page about what happened versus just an apology. Like, yes,
Mhm.
apology is good, but can
Yes.
we add context to what is going on and how things can be different next time? Because
Yep.
it probably will happen again, but let's do that process.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
I
love
think
that.
there's a lot of value in talking. There's a lot of value in just not making yourself up to be like this sing-songy. I mean, shout out to Miss Rachel. To be fair, she's banned in my household just because I'm like, I don't need y'all believing that that's what adults be acting like, because
We don't
that's not what your
really,
mama.
we don't really watch. We don't.
I joke with my friends all the time. I make my voice deep on purpose because I want them to understand I'm a real adult. I'm not doing all of that, but all that to say again, there's and for me too, I'm thinking about different systems my kids are involved in. And I know at school, for example, they do a lot of like, say you're sorry to your friend, which, okay, I'll
Yeah.
get on my soapbox about that another day. But again, I want my child in 10, 12 years, if they have a really good friend that they're cool with and they've gotten into a conflict, I want them to have language to how to navigate that conflict versus just, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but not being able to explain more of where the behavior came from, or maybe even being able to say to the other person, you were upsetting me in this moment, and that's why I had to like kind of get this way with you, or whatever it is. So context, context, context. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity to practice that language early with our kids and not think that they're either too young or that they're only. I don't even know if I'm sorry really makes a difference to our kids all the time as much as we want it to, if that makes sense, because they hear it in so many different or in so many different spaces. But
Agreed.
again, I think the communication piece and being open to just using two sentences versus just the one can really be helpful when you're doing repair with your kids.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. Before we start to wrap up, I know that we
Mhm.
wanted to talk about a tool that you use with your clients a lot, circles of security. So can you elaborate on that a bit? And what I will also do is share some information about it in the show notes so people can go to it if they want to hear more or learn more. But tell us about that tool and how we can use it and why it can be helpful.
The Circle of Security is a really awesome program that offers training to parents, therapists, anyone that's interacting with kids to understand what it means to be that secure home base for a child. They have this awesome picture that is a circle because what we want is our kids to come out like a boomerang into the world and be able to circle back and know that that home base is steady, that home base is accepting, and that home base is trustworthy. The circle
Mhm.
of security refers to ways we can practice that with our child by delighting in them, watching over them, only taking charge when we need to. And so there's some very specific behaviors named in that circle that parents can do outside of just outside of being just that secure base. And I like using it with parents because it's a clear picture of what you're aiming for. And again, there's some specific language that you can bring into your everyday world of how have I delighted in my child today? Have I laughed at them? Have I been silly with them, for example? Or have I said, "Oh, you look nice today," something like that. And so the circle of security is a longer training program and all that stuff. But again, I like using it with parents for the picture piece and also some very specific, let's this week focus on how do you help your child organize their feelings, for example.
Yeah, I love that. And like you said earlier, how do we make these things simple? And it sounds like that is something that parents can easily go to. It helps to provide them the language for how to do these things. And there's even like this visual imaging for what it looks like. Because I just think so many of us millennial parents, working parents, parents with small children. There's so much going on, and we need things simplified and just, help me do the things that need to happen. I think that is just very key for parents right now. How do we make
Mm-hmm.
it simple when it seems
Mm-hmm.
so complex? How do we make this more simple?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can feel
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable and confident too.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that. This
Yes.
was amazing.
I
So,
know.
and I feel like we need to have another conversation. So we'll talk about that another
I
day.
love
How we
that.
get back on the
Yes.
podcast. And you know what? I keep
Yes.
thinking in Baltimore, maybe it should be in person.
Let's do
But
it.
I always end every episode with an affirmation card. So I want to make sure that we pull a card today because
Yes.
for me, I like doing this. And actually, I'm gonna ask you, do you use affirmations in your practice?
All the time.
Really?
All the time. All the time.
They're really good. I use them more in my personal life and on the podcast, but I haven't blended them as much as I thought I would with my clients. And so I think I'm gonna start doing it. I'm gonna start doing it.
It's very like specific to our name because it's as cliche as it may sound or just like corny. Like a lot of times I'll ask clients, what's the bridge statement or what's the affirmation you're taking from today? And I'll close out and they say it like, you know, I am powerful beyond measure, for example. And I'll say, Ashe, Ashe, see you next week. Like that's kind of how the name even popped up for me for the practice of like just being able to affirm, to call in power that you need to make things happen in the way that you want. And so, again, affirmations are definitely some of my clients are probably like, I know, Michelle, I got to come with an affirmation. I'm like, hell yeah. Because if you don't believe in you, who else is? I mean, I do, but who am I every day? Like, I'm not with you every day. So,
Yes, agree. Okay, I'm inspired. I'm gonna start pulling them in. Okay, I'm gonna pull a card. Sometimes my deck be playing me. It'll give me something that we did not talk about, and I'm like, okay, somebody needed to hear this. So we'll see. Um, I think this is good. It says, I have the freedom to live life on my own terms.
yes, that's
I think
it.
I think it fits. I have the freedom to live life on my own terms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it fits,
Mm-hmm.
especially with our conversation around the internet and taking advice from certain people. But like what it makes me think of is just intuitively feeling confident, knowing that you do have the answers, even if you need a little bit of help finding
Yes.
them, trusting yourself, trusting your instinct with how you're building your relationship with your kids. And you don't have to do it like Miss Rachel does it. You don't have to do it how we do it in your own way. And that's probably the most effective way, the best way for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was so fun. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Me too. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
taking the
you.
time. I really do appreciate it. And
Thank you
we'll
so
talk
much for
soon.
listening to Dr.
Okay.
Amber's Know and Grow
Thank you.
podcast. I love that you're here. I love that we're learning together. We're growing together. We're navigating all these things together. We're really in this together. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave me a 5-star rating and review. That is so important because it helps this podcast grow. And it also gives me some feedback on how it's landing for you. Please share this podcast with someone that you love or someone that you know. And don't forget to connect with me on social media at Dr. Amber Thornton. I'll talk to you soon.